Hi there. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about something that is one of my pet peeves, as it were. It's this insufferable insistence by supposed Christians to convince other Christians that their job in life is not just to be a doormat. You've heard me talk about that. It's to be a loser, literally a loser. All right? And before you think I'm making it up, I'm going to play you the actual evidence. But first of all, let's make sure everything's working. Hi there. I see you all. In the Arabian Gulf. Wow, be careful. I'm looking at you guys. Hello, okay. I am here to learn, and learn you shall. Yes, greetings from Colombia. Hello. Aloha, everyone. Nice. Got some Hawaiians here. Let's go. Let's go indeed. All right. So let's do this. Hi, Raymond. Hi, Lies Destroy Lives. Scarlet Rose. All right. Very good. I trust you can all hear me. So let's do this. Hello from Finland. I always like it when when people are in these different places that one would normally not think of. So, gum. All right. Let me play you this video. It's by this group. You may have heard them. They're very well funded, and they're called He Gets Us. He, being Jesus Christ, gets us. Right there, I hope you see a problem. Are you sensing what is the message of those three words for a whole organization? He gets us. I think the message is, Jesus knows you're a bum, and he gets it. He's cool with it. Don't even try. Don't bother. Grace, you're saved. Off you go. Just continue being a doormat, and as I'll show you now, be a loser too. Honestly, what does he gets us mean? Did Jesus get the prostitute? Did he come up to her and be like, "Hey, I get you. Girl's got to turn a trick or two. I get it. I'm not judging prostitution. Off you go." After he told everyone, "He among you who's without sin, let him cast the first stone." Is that what he did? No, he didn't. Did he? Is that what he does with any other sinner? Does he just say, "Hey, I get it. I get you"? How about the Pharisees and the scribes and his enemies, who he routinely called the absolute worst things you can imagine and constantly opposed? Why didn't he just say, "Hey, I get it. I get you guys"? Or when you went into the temple, whip, overturning tables, getting zealous and angry. Why didn't he just say to all those people selling livestock and money traders, etc.? Why didn't he just say, I get it. I get you. I'm not going to, we're not judging anyone here. All right. So right there, just the very name of this organization is pretty heretical, if you ask me, because it's trying to promote the exact opposite of what Jesus was trying to promote. And as we're going to see, I hope, in this live stream, there's a world of difference between saying, I get you because you're a sinner and you're weak, and I'm a sinner and I'm weak and I get it, and saying, hey, what you're doing is A-okay, keep doing it because I get it, wink, wink. All right? The latter is completely false, and no Christian should ever think that way or try to promote that kind of thing. The former is okay. Yeah, I get you. We're both sinners. We should forgive one another in as much as forgiveness is called for. And but before you think I'm just ranting again, let me show you why I'm saying this. So let me play the first of the He Gets Us commercials. Mind you, this aired because He Gets Us sure have a lot of money, and this aired at the World Cup, a month or two ago. I didn't watch it, but a lot of people made sure to send this to me because it's right up my alley, right? So let me put it on and let's watch it. Yes, I do watch Blind Melon, so deal with it.
What if you lose? What if you lose the argument? Intentionally. or your popularity on purpose? What if you lose your ego, your time, your control? What if you lose for someone else?
There you go. Love, hang on. I'm actually going to play it again so I can make a couple of comments, but I didn't even notice that last ending. Love chooses to lose. Now, the first thing you will notice in this video, which is just like Satan always has truth mixed with lies. So portions of that video and the message, I think, are okay. One can say are arguably Christian. It talks about losing your pride, losing your ego. Okay, that's good. But notice the first two things. Let's watch them again, and I'll pause it.
What if you lose? What if?
All right. The first thing, what did you see? All right, let's put this abomination away. All right. So the first message is a man playing sports. I don't even remember what he was playing, soccer, basketball, whatever. And I think he was a goalie, and he's, what if you lose? Okay, it's one thing to say, what if you lose? Yeah, we shouldn't go kill ourselves if we lose. But this is a game. This is athletics. This is sport. Aren't we supposed to win, even in sports? Okay, so here's a news flash that you may find interesting. You may have heard me talk about muscular Christianity. Apparently, I didn't know this, but that word actually existed historically in the 19th century. And it was founded in Britain, of all places, and it was founded specifically to combat what was seen as the over-weakening, pacification, or the making Christians so passive and doormatish. And so they came up with what was called muscular Christianity. But the heart of it was sports. In fact, most of the modern sports that we know today were founded, formulated, and promoted by Christians who were part of this muscular Christianity movement. And that includes from the YMCA, which also involved itself in resistance training, weightlifting, basketball, soccer, football, okay? And even modern day Olympics. So it was actually Christians who went by the concept of muscular Christianity who invented and brought about sports. And they also brought about sportsmanship. And the whole point was so Christians can learn to be physically fit, disciplined, engage in activities, and have a good, honorable game. And now, lo and behold, from that same platform, sports, the athletes are told, hey, why don't you just lose? What is that? That's the Christian thing now? Honestly, think about it. What is this message? What does it mean? But that's just the beginning, okay? Now, let's get to the really problematic part. Let me put it back on and now let's see it again from the beginning.
What if you lose?
Watch this.
What if you lose the argument? Intentionally.
All right. That's the one that really gets me. What if you lose the argument intentionally? All right. Now, again, sounds good, right? When I already told you, that's the whole point. It sounds good, but remember, if we're being Christians, we're talking about Christianity, we're getting to theology here. Well, remember, Satan is the father of lies. And right beginning with Adam and Eve, he mingled truth with lies. And, he appears as an angel of light. So all would-be Christians need to be cognizant of that fact. Okay, now, back to the second one, which really rankles, which is, what if you lose the argument intentionally? All right, what is an argument? You may be wrong if you argue, but most people, when they argue, they're arguing over truth. Okay? One believes this is what it is. One believes the truth is here. One believes the truth is there. And they're arguing it. They're debating it. All right? Now, in what context is it Christian for me to be arguing on behalf of the truth? And then I say, the Christian thing is let the guy who's wrong live in his error, and let's promulgate the lie, because that's what Jesus would do, because he gets us. Do you see how damaging that is? Okay, a Christian, anyone for that matter, I think, should be striving for and trying to pursue the truth and talking about it. People die for the truth. In fact, the early Christians, what did they do? What about, let's start with Jesus, as usual. Again, did Jesus back down? Did he, when he was arguing with his critics, when he was arguing with Satan, he argued with Satan and got the better hand. 40 days in the desert with his enemies. Okay, same thing. So he's, which means what? There's a truth, and he's representing the truth. He's standing for the truth. If you agree with it, then there's no argument. But if you oppose it and you try to put a lie in its place, well, yeah, then it's proper to argue, is it not? So imagine this. Now you have this massive message telling Christians, lose the argument. Okay, so when your kid comes and says, I don't know, Dad, I went to sex ed and it said maybe I'm a woman, and I think I'm a woman now. Don't argue. Right? Be a good Christian. Accept that. Okay, and then think of all the other evils that go on, which if we don't stand up and argue against them, well, yeah, they spread and metastasize, and that's the whole point, right? You're supposed to combat it. But even after Jesus, what about the apostles and the disciples? Well, they preached the truth until they were killed. They didn't say, I'm not going to argue with you. And literally arguing. The church fathers argued with the pagan philosophers, like Origen, contra Celsius, I think I read a long time ago. But a lot of early church fathers argued with philosophers. Athanasius, the chief defender of the Nicene Creed, was persecuted and went into exile for so long. Why? Because he wouldn't back down. He was arguing. He was arguing on behalf of the truth. So this is a really dangerous message to start telling people that the Christian thing to do is to lose the argument. All right? Now, let me see. And, I took some notes here, and I'm not going to really get into giving you verses at this point. All right. But the point is, there's a distinction. Okay. You can sacrifice, you are called to sacrifice. And that's what I mean. It's a deceiving commercial, because maybe you should lose certain things, lose your pride, lose your ego, lose your lust, lose your whatever your vices may be, lose those, but lose the truth, which is exactly what arguing is about. It should be, at least that's how I see it when I hear someone talking about arguing. Let me give you a perfect example. All right. If you don't know this, I am going to, I'm in a debate with Majid Nawaz, in London on September 11th. Okay. And there's a question. What is the question? Is Islam incompatible with the West? I'll let you guess which side I'm arguing on behalf. And there you go. Debate is what? It's an argument. Now, Majid, of course, is going to come and argue that Islam is compatible with the West. I suspect that during this debate, during this argument, I will see a lot of loopholes and a lot of weaknesses and chinks in his armor. And, if I'm going to support the truth and argue that, yes, Islam is not compatible with the West, then I have to talk about it. I have to bring it in. I have to introduce it. I have to argue. But now, would I be a good Christian if I said, well, poor Majid, he's doing a good job, and he made a horrible point, but I'm just gonna let's lose the argument. I don't want to win. It's not about winning for me. It's about trying to get to the truth. That's the whole point of an argument. Okay. we are arguing because we contend some massive truth. One says this, one says the opposite. One says Islam is not compatible with the West, one says it is. Okay? It's a question of truth. And when it comes to questions of truth, we're talking about, we're on the realm of the divine as far as I'm concerned, because life is one long journey trying to ascertain the truth. So to start to tell Christians of all people that your job is to actually forfeit the truth because, I don't know, so you can be nice or something. So here's some Christians are exhorted, for example, in Jude 3, to contend earnestly for the faith. In this case, faith is synonymous with the truth, of course. They're told to always be prepared to give an answer. That's in Peter, 1 Peter. To appoint leaders able both to teach sound doctrine and refute those who contradict it. Yeah, very contentious, very argumentative, it sounds like. All right. Paul goes on so far as to say, quote, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Knowledge of God, again, would be a synonym for the truth, right? So again, notice the distinction. It's, you lose your ego, lose your pride, but don't sacrifice and lose the truth. That is not a Christian virtue. And shame on he gets us for actually making such a commercial like that, all right? Now, again, I'll give you a little bit of history and how Christianity spread. Christianity conquered the Roman Empire. Why? Not because the apostles intentionally lost the arguments to be nice guys. Not because they were debating with whoever and then they said, all right, I get you. Never mind. I was kidding about this gospel business. Okay. They persuaded others. They argued with others about the truth, even when it got them killed. Okay. And again, let me just pull something up for you. All right. So that's the first issue with that one. And, before I proceed, because sometimes they pile up, let's take some super chats. And we're going to look at another couple of things, actually. Hello, new member. Oh, all you members, I'm going to be doing a live stream just for members to take your Q&A. I made an announcement that members should have gotten. And if you have a question, I saw many people already put some questions. By all means, drop it there. And then I'll announce at some point when I'll be doing this Q&A. Lies destroy lives. What if the progressives lose the argument intentionally? If only they would shut up. Well, okay, so here's the point. Isn't it interesting that it's Christians who are forever told to lose, right? Lose the argument. Because that's a Christian thing to do, supposedly. And yet they are the ones who are already doing everything to appease everyone. How come this message isn't being geared towards others, okay? People who really need to shut up and maybe lose the argument, right? It's very diabolical if you really pay attention to how this is going. Lies destroy lives. Raymond, if you haven't already, tell the moderator not to allow any ad hominem in the debate. All right, moderator, is there ad hominem attacks? You're talking about Majid. Yeah, actually, I was thinking, maybe it might be fun to ask you guys, like, what do you think is going to be said? I can tell you I know what's going to be said in this debate, but I don't want to, give my cards away. But it might be fun to hear what you all think about how a person who is debating on behalf of Islam being compatible with the West, the things they're going to say. I've actually, for the last couple of weeks, ever since that Oxford Union debate, which really tickled me, and I decided to I've been working on a list of all the possible kind of apologetics that Muslims make. And when you really collate them and look at them, they're all so easily just blown out of the water, right? But again, that'll be for a later time. Hanif, Raymond, I believe Islam is not compatible with humanity. And never mind the West. Yeah, maybe that can be the question, right? I mean, that we're even having this debate, I think, exposes the real problem, right? I mean, I'm happy to participate, and I want, it's good that we're doing this, and I'll be discussing that during the debate. What I mean. New York Coin Research. Have you thought about reviewing interviews with Muhammad Tawhidi, the Imam of Peace? Nothing always seems off about his interviews, so he seems okay. I've met him once, maybe like 5-7 years ago at some conference. Seemed like a nice guy. Took some pictures with me, and kind of like he's dressed like an imam. I mean, that's his shtick, but kind of acted like a normal guy. So maybe that's just like his costume for attention. I don't know, but seemed like a good guy. Christoph, it's equivocal. An argument can mean a reason for or against something, the act of giving these reasons, but also an angry quarrel or disagreement. Okay, I thought about that too. Okay, if that's what they mean by an argument, but honestly, I don't think so. If you look at the nature of every single argument, and you may be wrong, I get it. One person may be completely, they both may be wrong. Two people may be arguing, they're both wrong. But the point is, by nature, arguments are such that you have two or more parties, and each one is convinced that their position is representative of what's true. That's it. That's the nature of arguments. Now, if you're just arguing to be a jerk, or if you're just arguing to argue, then okay, fine. But I don't know. That should be qualified, because most argumentation in and of itself is not bad. It's actually good, because it's a way of discerning and getting at the truth. Okay, that's what a debate is. That's why I mentioned what I'm going to be doing with Majid Nawaz. It's a debate. Well, a debate to me is synonymous with an argument. Yeah, we have an argument. One says this, one says that. We're gonna give our proofs, make our arguments, and see and try to get to the truth. That's the whole point. So to tell a Christian to lose that on purpose, I don't know. Doesn't sit well with me. Especially, like I told you, who it's coming from. An organization, and I'm not done. The next commercial is from the same He Gets Us organization. You're going to see there's definitely a theme and a pattern here. Natalia, I'm surprised you are not banned from entering the UK. Where can we watch the debate? That's a good question. Maybe I will be banned. I don't know. Usually I hear people find out once they get there. So I don't know. But where you can watch it, I posted some things, and also go to Winston Marshall. He's the one who's moderating it. He has all the information on where it can be accessed. Stefan, what do you think of the Save Europe Act? Do you think that playing by the rules will accomplish anything, or is a civil war inevitable? I'm not fully sure about what the Save Europe Act is, because there's so many, and many of them have this sort of name. It doesn't sound right. It sounds like probably a waste of time if it's what I think it is and what kind of is being suggested here. But playing by the rules will not. It will accomplish something. It will continue making the West lose, because the rules are obviously very rigged at this point. Speedrunner, Majid Nawaz is going to dilute Islam beyond the threshold of ship of Theseus and argue that it's compatible. Dilute Islam beyond the threshold of the ship of Theseus and argue that it's compatible. I think I know what you're talking about, but that won't fly with me. So that would be a real waste in his time. I'd deeply enjoy assisting you in a debate prep. Okay, thanks. Put any of your comments or your preps in the comments of this video. I'll be checking them out. Schwambub. One of my conservative professors told me in private that the majority of his colleagues are socialists. He's cautious about what he says in class. Well, of course. That's what academia and universities, leftist, right? Woke, all that sort of thing. No shocker there. Lies destroy lives. Imam Tawhidi makes Islam look good. I would argue he is part of the problem. Yeah, this is the thing that I don't get, and this is something I've seen with Majid Nawaz, which is like because a lot of people keep sending me things about him, and almost everything contradicts everything. Um, it sounds like it sounds like he acknowledges that, yeah, the Quran teaches violence and beating women, but he rejects that. But he's still a Muslim, and Islam can be reformed. You know, I honestly, these guys to me, they exist. They only exist because they're in the West, and it's very profitable to talk that way. Okay, to a starving Western public who needs to see a Muslim who can speak well and make a cogent argument about how, this Islam is a problem, but we're getting there. We're getting there. Just don't hate. He gets us. That mentality. Kevin, should we stop defending the secular West and instead fight to restore Christendom? Christendom should include Christian America, Africa, and Asia. I'd be on board with that. I've never understood what the West is. It's a direction. Never heard of an entire civilization. Usually is based on a religion, a culture, language. But the West is just a direction. And west of what? Isn't the West east of Japan? So yeah, that's the best we got is the West. But yes, it used to be called Christendom, and most of it got swallowed up violently by Islam, and Europe prevailed out of strength and perseverance. But now it's squandering its birthright away, and it's embraced this secularism West stuff. So yeah, it's going downhill. No shocker there. Deos Vult Club. The tolerant UK have exonerated Majid Nawaz, a former head disciple of Hizb ut-Tahrir. Yeah, that's what I mean. So I hear first he used to be a terrorist or a wannabe terrorist who went to jail. Now he's a reformer, and that's a good story, right? So that's how you get up in the media and you become important and famous. You have a story to tell. This shows how the doormat Christians have let Islam in. Majid may still be a member. He could be the ultimate example of taqiyya. He could. Now, who's to say yes or no, right? That's the thing about some Muslims. They just change based on the circumstance. If Islam is weak and they're in the West, well, they talk this way. If Islam grows strong, well, then they join the Islamic bandwagon. I'm not saying that about him, but I am saying that is definitely a well-known uh, phenomenon. Anyway, okay, thanks. I'll come back to these later. Let's now look at the second commercial. This is another one from He Gets Us, and this one also. This one. So this one, I did see that it was at during a Super Bowl, maybe 3-4 years ago. I don't know if they keep playing them over or what, but it definitely got a lot of airtime and a lot of people were talking about it. So let's play that one. And I'm sure if you've been paying attention, you may know what I'm talking about. Let me pull it up. All right. Here we go. Haha. Remember that? There you go. Again. I'm trying to pause this thing. Okay. There you go again. He gets us. It starts off kind of, I don't know, nothing too bad, right? Some guy washing some guy's foot. But then it kind of gradually starts taking on a certain like demographic change, which is kind of interesting. Um, if you were paying attention, it starts off like one white guy washing another white guy's foot. But then you start seeing different things, right? You see a white woman washing the foot of a kind of what it was. She's like a recently arrived, annoyed looking Hispanic migrant woman. A white woman washing the foot of a Muslim woman in a hijab. White man washing the foot of an American Indian. And my all-time favorite, and the one that again, there's always one thing about these commercials that really gets to me. And you have a priest or a pastor on his knees washing the feet of he's black. That doesn't matter. The point is he's like one of these trans things, trans woman, man, he, she thing. Okay. And then we get the grand finale, right? The grand point of the commercial is the bold words come. Jesus didn't teach hate. He washed feet. Okay. What do we do with this one? Notice how, it's arguable that Jesus didn't teach hate. I don't think Jesus taught hate for humans, of course. He taught love, compassion. But I think hate in and of itself is not a non-Christian virtue, because you should hate evil. Okay? You should hate wrongdoing. God does. Jesus does. I already went through the various things that he did. Okay? He wasn't a passive doormat. He didn't fall on his knees and start washing feet because he didn't go up to the Pharisees and, instead of arguing with them, go on his knees and say, hey, let me wash your feet because I don't teach hate. In the temple, he whipped them out. He didn't say, oh, I get you guys. Let me wash your feet because I get it. It's cool. All right? You see, very subtle distinction. Okay? And by the way, Jesus wasn't exactly this walking foot washing machine. He just washed his disciples in a very profound moment before the Passion. It's okay. And but most of his time, he wasn't on his hands and knees washing people's feet. Okay, he was saying and doing and teaching many, many other things, including that people must repent of their sins or face the fires of Gehenna. And as I've already told you, he even engaged in violence, as when he flipped over tables. I mean, I don't know how people get away with that part. The violence. This was violence, by the way. And people like to tell me, oh, he didn't whip anyone. He whipped the livestock out. No, go read your Bibles, especially John. It's actually interesting. The cleansing of the temple, the whipping, and the overturned tables, that's in all four Gospels. Pretty interesting. And John's is the most elaborate of them all. So here we have a snapshot of Jesus engaged in violence. Sorry, I don't know what you call someone hurling tables, taking a whip, and whipping humans and animals, driving them out. I think if I went somewhere and did that today, I would be engaged in violence, and I'd be shackled and taken to jail. Okay, so that's violent behavior on Jesus's part. And we've already seen the way he talked to people, his enemies. He called them sons of the devil. He called them vipers, brood of vipers. He said, you're fair on the outside and within, dead men's bones and all corruption. Okay, and by the way, this is first century, where that kind of talk isn't seen as funny. And little wonder his enemies wanted to kill him and did kill him. Okay. So it's just funny to me that this is one side of Jesus that we never ever hear about. All we're told about is just, hey, if you resist anything, you are you're a hater. Really? For example, one of the commercials images depicted a woman washing the feet of another a woman, a young girl who had apparently just performed an abortion at a family planning clinic. Okay, and there's people there, Christians, presumably protesting, but there's this one woman on her hands or knees washing the girl's feet, the girl who aborted. Okay, what's the message there? I think it's pretty clear. The true Christian doesn't protest, not even on behalf of the unborn outside abortion clinics. That's hate. Think about it. This this he gets us is supposed to be Christian. And now it's telling, if you try to defend life, okay, that you're a hater, get on your hands and knees and wash a foot. Okay. The true Christian in this formulation shuts up and does whatever to accommodate, in this case, those who want to choose to abort their progeny. And now, it's one thing if you were a Christian, you go and bomb a clinic. Okay, that's different. But protesting, what's wrong with that? Okay. So, stripped of its pious veneer, all such messaging is tantamount to saying true Christians do not resist, but actually accommodate sin. After all, and to be clear, the claim that Christians, anybody for that matter, should not hate is a complete smokescreen. Christians aren't protesting at abortion clinics or against illegal migration or against Islam because they are haters. Okay? No, it's because they oppose the killing of the unborn. They oppose the subversion of their nation. They oppose their cities becoming crime-ridden. Okay? Big difference. That's not hatred. And then, of course, as I was mentioning, the priest or pastor on his hands washing the gay man, I don't know what they're called, okay, LGBTQR, whatever, okay, that person, okay. Again, I think that priest can love that person. I think he can talk and be merciful to that person. But what we're being told is you're supposed to accept his way of life. You're supposed to say, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Jesus gets us, remember? Okay. This is really an abomination to me. I'm really disgusted by it. And the more I think about it, the more it really vexes, right? And like I said earlier, isn't it curious? Well, why doesn't, if you really care, he gets us people, why don't you make a campaign urging Muslims or Islamists or jihadists to start washing the feet of, instead of chopping the heads of, Christians? How about that? Maybe that's needed. Maybe that would go a long way in helping, right? Or how about telling crazy leftist wokists and revolutionaries, hey, why don't you lose the argument intentionally? Nope. It's just really interesting how these exhortations about be a good Christian are always reserved for they who are already tolerating more than everyone else, Christians. So apparently it's they who always need to be reminded, that is to say, guilt-tripped into believing that they need to surrender more, they need to forgive more, they need to yield more, they need to ask less of everyone. I mean, I hope you see that the agenda here, all right? Okay, there's a big agenda here. If you're an enemy of Christianity, what better way, and you can't defeat it on the field openly, okay? Because make no mistake of it, as of this moment where Christians are living not in the West, but outside the West, where you have actual Christians, real believers, they are being persecuted, they are being killed, they are being attacked, because that's the preferred way of destroying the Christian body. It's the easy, clean way. You kill them. But as I was mentioning earlier, Europe is a little different, and the West, because it was strong, because it went through centuries of perseverance and crusading and had a crusader spirit. So if you want to kill them, you're not going to kill them in combat. So what do you do? Oh, well, it's been a centuries-long campaign of subversion, convincing Christians that, hey, your religion is great. We being people who hate your religion. But make sure you know what it's really about. It's about not hating. It's about washing feet. It's about losing. It's about shutting up. It's about accommodating everything and anything that's evil and wrong. Okay? And dumb, foolish Christians bought it. Okay? Why? Oh, because the people who lead them astray, all the wolves in sheep's clothing, threw a couple of verses at them. And those verses sure sound like that. Okay? But yeah, you're supposed to take the time and read the Bible in its entirety. And you're going to see there's a lot of qualifications. There's a lot of balance that's put in. All right. And again, the perfect example is what I just told you. Jesus is now some hippie. He gets us. He's not out to judge. Hey, don't even try, man. Just lose, lay down. I get you. Yeah, but then this is the same Jesus who, as I told you, was violent and who condemned and cursed his opponents in very unflattering with very unflattering terminology. Okay, so why don't we have that? Why the imbalance? Well, it's intentional. Okay, you're not supposed to know that. And the point is, a Christianity that's taught to mistake meekness, and we really have to really talk about this word, that Christians who think that meekness is weakness, this only serves those who oppose and despise Christianity. Okay. And unfortunately, Christians have come down to believe that that is what their religion is. All right. And it's kind of funny because it wasn't like that before. You will not find any other civilization that does this sort of thing. All right. Every civilization historically has celebrated the virtues that helped it to flourish. Okay. Rome praised fortitude. Sparta admired courage. Islam has long celebrated and enjoyed and practiced jihad. Medieval Christendom once honored its defenders too. Men such as El Cid, Godfrey of Bouillon, Richard the Lionheart, Skanderbeg, all the guys that are in this book, by the way. I was just going through it. Defenders of the West. Okay, so there was a time when Christians looked up to and thought that was actual true Christianity. Okay, men who were laying down their lives for fellow men. Right, it's only this modern day Western Christianity, which just seems so utterly obsessed with celebrating one virtue to the exclusion of all others, if it is a virtue, basically surrender. And what is this virtue? It's the only one that serves to empower anti-Christian forces. Does that seem right to you? You think that's what Jesus wants? This is the end game. Hey, I want you guys to just do nothing, lay down, don't hate. I get you, man. Go engage in sin. I took care of that for you. Remember, you're saved. You're good. And just do nothing. And, when you read in the Bible where Jesus says people in the end times are going to be telling him, we did this, that, and the other thing. We brought fire down from the heavens, and he's going to say, I never knew you. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of those people, and they're from the current generation right now. Too bad. Now, to continue elaborating on this theme. So, did Christ? When did he tell them to become doormats, his followers? He told them to become saints. Now, what do saints do? Well, they do wash feet, but they also confront kings. Balance. They forgive enemies, but they also expose falsehood. Balance. They surrender their wealth, comfort, reputation. They lose those things. They lose their pride, even their life itself, but they don't surrender the truth. Okay? Just because, hey, he gets us, let's surrender the truth once in a while. Why do you have to do this arguing thing? Let it go. Again, I'm not talking about petty, stupid, silly arguments. But to me, the word, that's a big word, argument. That encompasses like the quest for truth, right? And if Christianity was what it is today, history would have been very different. Historic Christianity didn't transform the world, and it did by teaching men to lose, but by teaching men to conquer themselves and then the world with the truth. All right. Now, let me see what you guys have to say as I ramble. Kevin, Reconquista 2.0, launch the 21st century crusade. I'm all for that, but I don't think it should be geared against Muslims. It should be geared against their empowerers, their enablers, the he gets us kind of mentality. That's what's making this happen. All right. Like I said in my last live stream, you get rid of those guys and that warped, sick way of thinking, and the Islam problem solves itself. It's only a problem because it's a symptom of these deeper issues that we're talking about, which is Christians thinking their job is to just fall down and wash feet and lose all the time. Give me a break. All right. Stefan, if you were the benevolent dictator of any European country, would you ban Islam altogether, or would you have some degree of tolerance? Now, that is a good question. Let me entertain this one now and ruminate in my head what I would do. Well, there's a difference. Would this be me in charge of a country that's already overrun by Muslims? Or, let's say it's a normal country. And if it's a normal country, I would just simply say, kind of like they did in Hungary and in Poland, I'm not going to be disrespectful. You have your way. We have our way. and we don't want your way here. Done. Okay? It's not that complicated. Now, if you talk about places that have already given up, given their lands away, the peoples who've been betrayed by their leaders, and now Islam is everywhere, growing and taking over. Now, if I was like undisputed monarch, I would, yeah, you know what I would do? And this is this is almost a playbook out of Spain. Okay, I've talked about this a lot, and I've written about it a lot. But so as you know, Spain was a little microcosm of jihad and crusades, Reconquista. And this goes on for centuries, some 7-8 centuries. And then finally the Christians win. Muslims had invaded in the 8th century, and they stayed there until 15th, 16th century. Okay. And initially, the Spaniards, this is now, we're talking about Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, who united the Spains. Initially, when they finally conquered Granada, 1492, what are they going to do? There's 500,000 Muslims there. So they said, okay, you can live, but you can do your Sharia, but that you have to live in your area, and you got to respect the peace and this and that. Well, whenever they could, the Muslims tried to subvert and take advantage. They would try allied with Barbary pirates, they allied with the Ottomans, and it was always what we would call Takeya. It wasn't even classic Takeya yet. Classic Takeya was yet to come. And so the Spanish crown finally decided the only way these people who hate us because of this Muhammad business, okay, because of this, they didn't call it Islam at the time. It was the Saracens and the Moors and their false prophet Muhammad. That's how he was known. The only way we can be at peace with these people is if they stop being Muslim and they become like us, Christians. Okay, so they were told, all right, you have 3 choices or 2 choices. Which is not unlike what the Muslims had given to the Christians or anyone that they conquered. And the choices were, you can convert, become Christians and stay here, assimilate, or go back whence you came, North Africa, basically to Morocco, modern-day Morocco, which is in the news vis-a-vis Spain, isn't it? Ceuta and whatnot. All right, so guess what happens? They get fatwas by leading sheikhs from North Africa. And the fatwas are all about the doctrine of taqiyya. This is now the classic definition of taqiyya, which is if you are under duress, and they weren't, duress would be, and here's the elasticity of it all. A lot of Muslim apologists will tell you taqiyya is, someone's threatening to kill you unless you renounce your religion, and then you can fake it as long as you keep your Islam in your heart. Then you can fake it because your life's being threatened. But their life wasn't being threatened. They were just being told, get out. Go back to North Africa. But the Taqiyya fatwas said, yes, you can get baptized, you can go to their churches, you can partake of communion, the whole 9 yards. All right. And that's exactly what they did. And and this goes on now for decades, literally. And what happens? Well, whenever they can, these so-called Christians are now still engaged in trying to subvert Spain back to Islam. And it's just amazing when you look at some of the records of the times, because you have clerics talking about how, there were these Muslim families, Moriscos, as they called them, that became Christian. And we're talking like 2, 3, 4 generations. They had been Christians. You'd think that's it. They're real Christians. But even the 4th generation was still a Muslim at heart. The whole thing was a facade. But they were complaining, the Spaniards, that these people were actually... they were better Christians than us. They attended church more regularly. They did all the outward show, okay, of being a Christian better than most Spaniards. And yet in their hearts, no matter how many generations had passed, they were Muslims still engaged in jihad. So that's where, by the way, this is the origins of the Inquisition. Okay. It's, how are we going to know? You said you're a Christian, but now you're acting like a Muslim. These are the humble origins. Okay. And you're never told that, though, are you? It's just always in a vacuum. Just these random, crazy Christian Catholic king and queen just went and ruined all this peace. Everyone was living in peace, and they just forced everyone to become a Christian, or they tortured them with inquisitions. And by the way, if you really are interested in the Inquisition, do some research, and you'll find out it was actually considered a very humane institution compared to the secular courts. Okay. I hate these phones. Why didn't I silence it? Okay. And so that's the origin of the Inquisition. And that's when they finally kicked them all out. They said, "Look, we can't even trust it. If you guys convert, and we think you got rid of your crazy jihad stuff, and you're Christians now, and you're not. You're still even more bitter, embittered jihadists with a real axe or a scimitar to grind." Okay, so what was the conclusion? You have to leave. Now I tell you all this because you asked me a question. What would I do? And I'm trying to let you know that if I'm now in a country, let's say I'm the king of England, a real king, and I can do whatever I want. Okay, I would have a frank discussion with the Muslims, the way Ferdinand and Isabella did. I'd be like, "Look, this is your religion. I'm not going to sit here and play games. I'm not going to sit and debate you. We know what it is. We know what you think. We know what you're trying to do. Okay, and there's nothing for it, but you have to leave. Okay, I would be open. The reason I gave you that whole story was I would be open to their renouncing this creed, but you've just seen that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So it's pretty tricky. It would, but I suppose you can give them a good severance package, kind of make it a little better or something of that nature. Anyway, I've really gone on about that question, but it was quite intriguing. Never thought about it. Hanif, Majid has a cleanly shaven mustache and a beard. He is a soldier of Muhammad. Good luck in the debate, Ray. You are the Coptic crusader. Deus vult. Thanks, Hanif. That is interesting. I've always found this interesting. You find the Muslim who does the Salafi beard, and they trim their mustache, and sometimes they put henna, a little red, on their beard or their head. I see this a lot with Somalis. And you know why they do that? Because in a hadith, Muhammad said, "Clip your mustache so you don't look like a Christian or a Jew." And I think it's such an ugly look. I don't know about you, but when I see a guy with a beard and no mustache, it just there's something that looks really stupid about it. It's one thing to have a mustache and no beard, a goatee, just this area. But a beard with no mustache. I mean, I know Abraham Lincoln did it. There's just something a little goofy about it, especially when. But anyway, my point is that why are they doing that? So Majid Nawaz, who I suppose is a reformer or a moderate, still takes Muhammad's word so literally that based on that hadith, he decided to shave his mustache off. And that always makes me wonder when I see Muslims who follow outward signs of Islam, rather innocuous signs like this business of clipping the beard. What if they're taking these outward signs seriously? What makes you think they wouldn't take the less visible inward sides, inward aspects of Islam seriously too? Again, I'm not talking about him per se. I'm just saying this is an observation I've always had when I see Muslims who follow the outward show of Islam. It's to me, it's like a clear sign that this is a radical. This is what you call a radical. He's a Salafi. He's trying to follow Muhammad literally. Christopher, this ad wants to make you think that Jesus was a spa worker. Yeah. And the sad thing is, most people, Christians, will watch these two ads and they'll just think, that's what Jesus wants. Don't hate, wash feet, stop being critical about women aborting and, homosexuality and bisexuality and sexual confusion. Just shut up and wash some feet, man. That's what Jesus would want, right? I don't know how there isn't outrage about that. Ked, Indonesia has the world's largest Muslim population. They are not as troublesome to the West. Or are they, and we just don't hear it? Well, they're not as troublesome to the West because I don't know where are Indonesians being transported into Western countries en masse. I don't know. You seldom hear that. But by the way, they are problematic. Okay, I know because I follow the persecution of Christians in the Islamic world, and Indonesia often comes up in the context of Muslims not wanting a church near them, Muslims forcing Christians to shut down a church, Muslims refusing to have Christians worship for Easter or Christmas. That is a regular, like every month, if not every week, story coming out of Indonesia. But as far as why you're not, hearing about them here, I don't know what is there a Western country that has a huge amount of Indonesians? Thanks, TB. My argument: out of the 18 Muslims and 1 million mosques in the Middle East, what percent of imams would agree with anything he says? How many would takfir him? You're talking about Majid Nawaz. Well, this is, of course, what I always hear. When you see these moderates, like also that Oxford Union, those little girls who come up, having a hissy fit about, you don't understand true Islam. Can you quote that verse in context? Okay. Yeah. These people exist for our consumption. These people would, the range would be from laughed at to imprisoned to killed if they took that message to their co-religionists. Okay, so they exist for our consumption to pacify, weaken, and dissemble and befuddle non-Muslims, the West especially. That's their purpose, and that's why to the Muslim world at large, of course, they won't listen to them, but they don't mind them because they're doing their own jihad too, aren't they? They're confusing the West. They're engaged in jihad al-lisan, jihad of the tongue, or jihad of propaganda. The small frit, suicidal empathy is a very good definition. Why has this become a sickness? Why hating oneself is popular and preached by the elites? Well, that's a good question. But it's only in one civilization, the West, that this happens. The elites of other nations don't do that. They don't preach hatred of the heritage of the civilization they purportedly come from. That's interesting, isn't it? And, your guess is as good as mine. Thanks. Lies destroy lives. True shepherds try to protect the sheep. Perhaps we shouldn't allow men to become pastors, priests, if they are not advocating for persecuted Christians. Well, okay, I mean, I agree with you, but how about just advocate for Christianity? These Christians this message is being pushed around. I'm all for, of course, advocating for persecute Christians. I agree with you, but my point is, forget about that. I mean, usually these are the same Christians who are engaged in policies that make sure Christians in the third world and Islamic world are being killed. So they could care less about that. But how about in your own nations, tell people that, there's a difference between right and wrong behavior, instead of telling them, hey, man, he gets us. Just lay back. Don't do anything. Don't do anything. That's works. You're earning your way. What a bunch of garbage. And don't misunderstand me. There's a lot to say there, which I'm not going to say or talk about today. Pop the kettle on, love. Where is the pineapple and flamingo? I moved them because they look rather outlandish. Okay. And I didn't notice them the last time. But in case you haven't discerned, this is not my normal domicile. This is actually a friend's. So I sometimes forget what's in the background, but yes, they have a pineapple and a flamingo, which are actually kind of good looking, but yeah, they don't necessarily suit the ambiance of what we're discussing here. Christoph, look up the Anabaptists if you haven't already. Yes, I know, they're ultra pacifist. Foot washing and nonviolence are big for them, and they had outsized influence in American Christianity. Okay, so you're saying maybe they had a big influence on this sort of thing? We're gonna wrap it up by talking actually about. We're gonna look at actual serious arguments that people make. When they say, "Well, Christians are not to resist evil." But let's finish these. The lady gunsmith. Jesus modeled the balance of physical and spiritual strength for us. The people using the Bible to manipulate us also hate it until they need to use it against us. Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's what they're doing. So they're pretending it's all about one thing, just the weakness. The whole point of Christianity is it moderated the evil, but it didn't get away. It didn't, or not the evil. It moderated passion. That's what meekness is. Meekness is it's not Meekness is the ability to control your passions, but you might have to gear them towards violence. That would be meek. Jesus said he was meek. He was violent. He engaged in violence. I mean, deal with it. I know a lot of you don't want to hear me say that, but I told you, what is that? What do you call that when someone whips people and throws tables around? I think that's called violence, right? So if he's meek, and he said he was, then apparently to be meek is not necessarily not to be violent. Drew Traver. I found out I'm 1% North African from the Maghreb region of Berbers. Are there good sources of Berber-European interactions that can help this mystery? Well, yeah, the Berbers from the Maghreb, North Africa, are the ones who flooded Spain, and from there, Europe. They were known as the Moors, massive Berber population. In fact, when Spain got conquered in 711, the vast majority of the army were Berbers, not Arabs. So it makes sense if you're European to have actually Berber ancestry. You know, Othello, Shakespeare. Jesuits created Islam. Okay. Bevon, hiding the history from school and university was the beginning of today. Well, yeah, exactly. Fake history and teaching people the exact opposite of history, which is fake history. As I always maintain, it's much worse than fake news. Its damage is much more overarching, and has it controls how you see the world, right? Hi, hiding. Christopher, why is it that only the West engages in self-critique and overall acceptance? Well, self-critique is good, but again, where's the balance, right? It's all about balance, and this isn't self-critique. If this was self-critique, it wouldn't be drowning in fake histories that are meant to demonize Europe and Christianity. Farland, I'd like to hear your 2 cents on the fat electrician's video on the Barbary Wars one day. I have no idea who this fat electrician is, but you've piqued my curiosity, and so mayhaps I will look into that. Tony, any truth to the word mafia deriving from ma'afar, Arabic for shelter or place of refuge, mob practices of violence, extortion, etc., from Dimitude and Jizya after Sicily freed? Tell you what, next week on my Substack, I'm going to have a massive, probably 3,000 word article titled, tentatively, The Mafia of Allah. And it's going to show you all the main 10 parallels between Islam and the mafia. And as for the word mafia, I think it actually, some people say its etymology is another Arabic word, which maha, which means bravado. And you can kind of see the connection. Odysseus. Greetings from your ethnic and religious neighbor, Raymond, Greek and Cypriot Greek. Well, hello. Thank you for what you do. I pray for your well-being and safety. Well, I appreciate that, my Greek and Cypriot friend. That's very nice. Schwambub. If Europe doomed unless going back to the theology before the 1050, is Europe doomed unless going back to the theology before the 1054 schism? Is Protestantism and non-denominationalism even enough to save it? That's a deep question. No doubt all these schisms have played a massive role in the fragmentation of Europe and Christendom in a major way. I discuss a lot of that. I discuss how the Protestant Reformation really did help improve the image of Islam in the West. Don't get angry if you're a Protestant. This is a historical fact. Protestant historians say this. And the reason for it is because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And who was the enemy of the Catholics? Islam for centuries. Now the Protestants come on the scene. Their enemy is the Catholics. So maybe they can be friends with the Muslims. And so they were. Check out Queen Elizabeth and her, cozy affair with the Barbary pirates. and other examples. For example, okay. Again, I'm not making theological arguments. Which, if you're a Protestant, that's what you should care about. I'm talking about historical developments, and it's only natural. This is a well-known fact that first, the 1054 schism, of course, didn't work well, especially for Constantinople, and the 1517 also really ruptured the Christian world, which is why you have a lot of Protestants who think Catholics are the real enemy, not Muslims, and vice versa. All right, one last, so this isn't a video, this is something I had, someone sent it to me, but again, it really proves the point, and I'm just going to read it to you, but I'll pull it up here. It's an X post that I made, which I seldom do, but the mood took me to actually just write something instead of actually writing an article. And let me pull it up and we can read it together. Okay, here it is. So I wrote, everyone seems to take it for granted that hostility and violence have no place among Christians. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, just asked Tommy Robinson, who has been vocally critical of Islam and Muslims in Britain, how, quote, attempting to lead a life of Christian discipleship squares with public rhetoric designed to produce hostility and violence. So basically, this Archbishop asked Tommy Robinson, if you read the context of the article, he was basically saying, I don't know if he's a real Christian. And then he says this, because, you know, what Tommy Robinson is doing, how can that be a life of Christian discipleship when it's designed to produce hostility and violence? And there we go again, right? So here's my response, which is going to be deja vu if you've been listening. I write, this ignores the fact that Jesus Christ himself used extraordinary hostile language against those whom he saw as corrupting society. He publicly called the scribes and Pharisees hypocrites, blind fools, children of hell, a brood of vipers, and sons of Satan. He also violently overturned the money changers' tables, made a whip of cords, and forcibly drove them and their animals out. So the real Christian question is not whether hostility or force can ever be justified. Scripture itself settles that. The question is hostility towards what? Force against whom and under what circumstances? Those are the only questions. The modern assumption that Christianity requires Christians to be eternally passive, agreeable, and non-confrontational, doormats, even in the face of evil, is not Christianity. It is a lie designed to neuter and make Christians vulnerable. And I maintain that till this very day. So there you go again. So it's not just this he gets us business commercial. Here's this Archbishop. Once again, oh, how can you be a Christian? You said a mean word. Well, so did Jesus. Where do people get this idea that Jesus never said anything mean or that he was so passive? It's the exact opposite. Crack open your Bibles, people. I don't know. Do you just listen to pastors and they just hammer about 5 verses about being a doormat and that's it to you? This is Christianity? Anyway, so, all right. I want to wrap it up. Let's now quickly look at a very important claim. Let's talk a little theology now, right? There's this, when I talk the way I'm talking and say what I'm saying, a lot of people may say, well, but Christians are not supposed to resist evil. And that's a biblical verse, okay? All right. And so what is that about? Okay, well, the only rational theological response is that Christ forbids personal vengeance, not defense of the innocent, not restraint of evildoers, okay? Turn the other cheek governs what a Christian should be prepared to suffer personally. It does not command him to turn someone else's cheek over to the aggressor, okay? So resist not evil cannot mean never oppose wrongdoing or evil, okay? And that is do not resist evil. I believe that's Matthew 5:39, all right? But if that verse, resist no evil, was basically trying to prohibit every form of resistance, you know what that would mean? Christians would not be able to ever restrain a murderer. Maybe these are your Anabaptists. They would not be able to protect a child from sexual abuse. They would not even be able to arrest a criminal. That's violence. Nor would they be able to rescue someone being attacked. Okay? How about this? Here's a bit of nice hypocrisy for you, for all those Christians who are here to say, oh, I'm wrong, what I'm saying, and because Christians must not resist evil. So what about the fact that almost every Christian, let's say in America, supports the police and the militaries? There's a contradiction here. If it's always sinful to use physical force against another person, then but at the same time, Christians are saying police officers and soldiers may use physical force to protect society. So it's basically what you're doing is you're calling something a sin, but you want it as long as you have other people do it for you. That's a nice bit of hypocrisy, right? And in fact, that is the common escape. People will say something like, "I personally would never use violence, but society needs police and soldiers." All right. So that may describe a personal vocation of non-resistance, but it does not establish that violence is inherently sinful. On the contrary, it concedes that force can be morally necessary while asking others to bear its physical and spiritual burden. Okay? So basically, in this formulation, the pacifist enjoys an order maintained by actions that he's condemning, violence and force, provided someone else is doing them for him. Okay? That's pretty disgusting. So any Christian who sits here and tells me, well, we're not supposed to resist evil, well, then you should not be living in this. Why do you should go live to a country that doesn't have the police or a military, okay? Because they engage in violence and you're a taxpayer. That means you're supporting it. So, all right. And so, for example, again, going back to that Matthew 5, those actually concern insults, lawsuits, compelled service, and personal demands. And what Christ is doing, he's basically attacking the spirit of retaliation. The idea of, you injured me, so I will injure you. You humiliated me, so I must recover my honor. Okay, that is something a Christian should combat, and that's the evil you should resist. Okay, so he must be, or she must be, the Christian, willing to surrender their pride, comfort, even their life. Okay, but this does not grant the aggressor a moral right to injure others. Okay, so here's the neat distinction. Here's what vengeance is. Vengeance is, you hurt me, so I will make you suffer. Okay, well, that's something you should work on. That's where you should start forgiving people and that sort of thing. Now, here's protection. I must prevent you from hurting him. That's a good thing. Okay? Here's justice. Your wrongdoing must be restrained and properly punished. Also good. And here's correction. You must be stopped partly for your own moral good. In these four, the only one that we can say is bad is vengeance. But the other three, which also involve force and correction, are correct. And this is exactly how Christians historically, need we get into what Paul says about the importance of those who govern and the authority they have? So basically, the same physical action can be sinful or virtuous, depending upon the authority, the purpose, the necessity, and the intention. All right. Love of neighbor may actually require resistance. Think about that. Christian morality does not contain only negative commands about harming others or against harming others. It also imposes positive duties to protect others. Okay? John 15:13. Wait for it. This is one of the most oft quoted verses by the Crusaders. All right? Quote, greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Okay? This is what the Crusaders were saying when they were marching to the Holy Land. Because they had nothing to gain. They were leaving comfort. They were leaving home. They were leaving food, shelter, wives, children. And they were going to the great unknown, dying on the way, most of them, many of them, starvation and disease. And if they reached there, engaged in warfare. And even when they won with the reconquest of Jerusalem, all of them wanted to leave because they had done their pilgrimage. And the ones who stayed, it was basically a sacrifice for them. Godfrey of Bouillon, who became the not the king. He wouldn't take that title, but he became the guardian of the Holy Sepulchre. Really wanted to go home, just like the rest of them, because he had lands. He was a great man back home, but he stayed there as a sacrifice. Okay, so they were actually living in accordance to the verse that says, "Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." Because what was happening to the Christians of the Holy Land in the Middle East? Well, they were being savaged and mauled by the Saracens and the Turks. That is to say, the Muslims. Okay. And so here's the important thing: laying down one life for another may require standing between the victim and his attacker. Refusing to intervene can become culpable passivity rather than Christian meekness, true meekness, good meekness, the way I was trying to define it. If a man watches someone murder his family while saying, "I'm going to turn the other cheek," he's not offering his own cheek. He's offering theirs. He has confused another person's life with something he is entitled to surrender, his own cheek. Okay, that is cowardice. Augustine, who did all, the chief articulator of just war theory, he argued that Christian patience must remain an inward disposition, while charity can require outward resistance for another's good. Now, Aquinas, good old Aquinas, greatest theologian of the medieval era, he expressed the same exact principle. One may sometimes refrain from defending oneself, but resistance may become necessary for the common good or the good of those being restrained. So, there's a lot of circumstance involved. It's not just, "Oh, I never engage in violence." Okay. Jesus didn't do that. None of the early Christians did that. The medieval Christians didn't do that. But you're told to do that. Okay. And I'm not preaching violence here. I'm talking about, getting a little balance. All right. Now let's wrap it up by talking a little bit about meekness, this word. Much mischief has been done with this word. Okay. Meekness is controlled strength. It's not impotence, as you may think. Even I, growing up, whenever I hear the word meek, it's not something I want to associate myself with. It just sounds kind of like it's very pansy, it's just weak, kind of frivolous, meaningless. Okay, but that's not the meaning. I too have been subverted in my knowledge of what this word means. All right. Biblical meekness, and you can check it out for yourself, doesn't mean an inability or unwillingness to confront evil. As I already told you, Christ describes himself as meek, yet he pronounced judgments. He confronted authorities. He whipped men out of the temple, and he willingly advanced toward those coming to arrest him. Is that meek? Not the way we understand the word meek. Okay. Now, the true meek man is the man who's not incapable. The truly meek man is not someone who's not incapable of anger or force. It's the man who can master them. That's the meek man. He doesn't act from wounded pride, as we said, or panic or cruelty or hatred. These are our emotions. But when a just cause requires him to act, even with violence, because justice demands violence, he does so. That's the meek man. Okay, that's precisely the principle Christian chivalry attempted to embody. Okay, the warrior must first conquer himself. All right, courage without justice becomes brutality. Meekness without courage becomes surrender to evil. So when you hear the word chivalry, again, here's one of those thoughts. Growing up, when I hear the word chivalry, I thought to me it's embodied by some guy taking off his jacket and throwing it at a puddle so some woman can walk across it. All right, so that is not in any way, shape, or form historic chivalry. Historic chivalry was, instead of being a knight who just is all about himself, okay, he acts on his pride and his lust and his ego, his honor, okay, it's to be a knight who conquers the self, but puts himself in service of the good, okay, including through violence and force. So he conquers his vices that propel him into warfare, let's say, anger, rage. But when the time comes and it is just to go into warfare, well, then he's a fighter. And this is perfect meekness. In fact, the Knights of the Temple, the Templars and the Hospitallers and all the military orders, that is how they saw themselves. They were meek men, because they, even in their charters, it says how when they fight, they have to make sure that they're not hating the Muslim, the Saracen. They don't have hatred in their heart. They're fighting evil. They're not fighting the evildoer. But the evildoer, through his evil, is killing people. So he has to be stopped. Okay? So, the angry man, for example, the opposite now, he's possessed by his anger. So he's not meek. The coward is possessed by his fear. He's not meek. The people pleaser is possessed by his need for approval. Now, the meek man remains master of himself and therefore capable of acting in accordance with the truth, which means at times through violence, through just retribution, through justice, through warfare. Okay? It's also important to keep in mind meekness is not the absence of anger. Aquinas explicitly teaches, actually, that anger can be morally good. Well, it kind of makes sense. Isn't God described as having wrath and anger? Jesus was angry in numerous occasions. So anger is praiseworthy when it follows reason and is directed against genuine injustice. It becomes sinful when it precedes reason, okay, when the passion decides first and the intellect merely invents excuses afterward. All right. I know this sounds kind of convoluted, but Aquinas really gets deep into it, right? So for him, sinful anger, which commands reason, these are the different categories that he talks about. So sinful anger commands reason. That's not good. Zealous anger obeys reason. So that would be Jesus. He had zealous anger, the way he's described in the temple, and that obeys reason. Meekness keeps anger within its proper bounds, where it belongs. It doesn't snuff it out, okay? And defective anger. Now, this is very important. This is very important for today's Christians. Aquinas talks about defective anger. And you know what that is? It's the failure to react when justice requires it, right? So this is a very important point. Aquinas says, in his Summa Theologia, he says that a man may sin by not becoming angry when he ought. And then he goes on to cite the traditional warning that unreasonable patience, the he gets us message, encourages negligence and emboldens wrongdoers. Sounds familiar. Without properly governed anger, judgments become unstable and crimes unchecked. Okay? So, according to Aquinas, and I agree with him, if you don't get angry enough, that's also a sin. So the classical Christian recognizes two opposite failures. One, excessive anger. We're familiar with that. Rage, cruelty, vengeance, disproportionate punishment. And defective anger, which is what? Cowardice, indifference, and refusal to confront evil, i.e. modern day doormat Christians. Okay? They are suffering from defective anger. Now, true meekness, occupies the virtuous mean. Okay, not mathematical moderation, but precisely the response demanded by reason and justice. Okay, so here's I put together a couple of sentences just to show you like how it can be summarized. Christ commands me to relinquish vengeance for injuries done to me. He does not authorize me to abandon my neighbor to violence. I may offer my own cheek, property, or life. I may not offer yours. Scripture condemns private vengeance while recognizing lawful force. It praises those who sacrifice themselves for others and calls the magistrate bearing the sword God's servant. Christian love, therefore, limits force, purifies its intention, and sometimes absolutely requires it. Okay? Now, let's talk about the doormat Christian, right? Now, the man who never confronts anyone may appear gentle, meek, but his passivity is actually coming oftentimes from fear, weakness, laziness, indifference, a desire for approval, avoidance of responsibility, or inability to defend himself. Okay? And that today, you have all these Christians, these doormats, who behave the way they do out of fear and weakness and laziness and indifference and desire for approval and avoidance of responsibility. Why? And then because of those reasons, and then they pat themselves on the back and tell you, I'm virtuous, I'm religious, and you're engaged in violence, and you need to be a doormat and go wash some feet, and because that's hate what you're doing, and go lose too. Don't if you're arguing and you're talking about the truth, just lose it. Wow. So just keep in mind, there is no virtue in refraining from doing what one was incapable or afraid of doing in the first place. And again, this is a message to the overwhelming majority of Christians, right? The genuinely meek man may possess great authority and power. His virtue appears because he refuses to misuse that power. That's why he's meek. He can punish, but does not punish from spite. He can answer an insult, but does not need to vindicate his ego. He can fight, but does not love fighting. He can forgive personal injuries while remaining immovable where truth or innocent life or justice is concerned. You see the difference? It's all about motive and mastery. Here again is a little chart I kind of put together. Here's the doormat versus the meek man, the truly meek man. The doormat avoids conflict from fear. The meek man chooses or refuses conflict according to duty. The doormat cannot control the aggressor. The meek man first controls himself. The doormat surrenders truth to preserve comfort. Yeah, that's a big one today, isn't it? The meek man speaks truth without hatred, but it gets him in trouble, possibly. The doormat tolerates injuries against others and calls it virtue, calls it, I'm turning the other cheek. The meek man bears personal injuries but defends others. The doormat confuses passivity with love, or likes to think that's the case, whereas the meek man acts for the genuine good of victim and offender because there's a higher good, there's a higher standard. It's not about you or him. It's about justice and the truth. The doormat is governed by fear. The meek man is governed by reason and charity. All right? So there's a massive big difference and for what it means when Jesus talks about being meek and defines himself as meek. And again, Christ is the model. He calls himself meek and humble of heart. But the Gospels, like I showed you, do not depict him as a passive doormat, okay? The same Christ who silently endured mockery during his passion also called the Pharisees hypocrites, blind guides, serpents, whitewashed tombs. He rebuked Peter, said, "Get behind me, Satan." He confronted religious authorities publicly. He expelled the merchants from the temple, overturned tables, made a whip of cords, pronounced judgment upon unrepentant cities. Okay? So that's meekness. So I guess here's another one. The best concise definition, a strong formulation would be Christian meekness is not the renunciation of strength, but the mastery of it. It is the virtue by which anger and power are subordinated to reason, justice, and charity. Patient under personal injury, but capable of firm and forceful action in defense of truth and the innocent. Okay? Or, more succinctly and to the point, the meek man is not one who cannot strike. He is one who will not strike from wounded pride, but will strike according to justice. All right? Oh. All right, let me put this away. Let's see what you have to say. Honey, Frey, do you think Nasser El Sambati was robbed against Dorian Yates in the 1997 Mr. Olympia? Absolutely. It's very obvious. Everyone knows that. Worst Mr. Olympia theft in history. Worse, I would say, than Arnold's comeback in 1980. I know Mike Menser and these guys got really upset about it, but yeah, he's Arnold. You got to do that. But the Nasser El Sambati bit was horrible. And now you got me talking bodybuilding again. This guy. Pop the kettle on love. Does orthodoxy seem to be more realistic on Islam? Yeah, I think so. Because it doesn't have all these things that we're talking about. I've listened to Orthodox priests of all the denominations, Eastern and Oriental and all that. And none of them would, they would agree with what I'm telling you. Meekness is meekness. But it's not, I'm a doormat. It's not, I fall down before evil. I don't resist evil. It's nothing like that. Okay? Love is love. Now I sound like these people. Love is love. I take that back. Love is not love. But love, even that word, what they've done to it. I can't say that word love without kind of cringing a little bit. When you hear like Christians that must love, because it sounds like, because we're taught that love is this, again, emotional kind of thing, some sentimental thing. Of course, that's not what it is. Agape in the Greek is love. And agape is The best way it's expressed is willing the good for the other. That's love. Okay, I want the best for you, and if I can help that happen, okay. So it's actually there. It's not sentimental. It's not emotional, and that's important for me. I find it weakens love when you turn it into a sentimental, cloying kind of thing, and that's the whole problem now. Everything that we are as Christians are told to do have been sentimentalized and emotionalized. So love means what I just said. Meekness again means I just do nothing. Okay, and yeah, I'm sorry, but that's not the image I get when I read the Bible. They mean something quite different. Okay. So there it is. We saw those commercials. He gets us. Don't fall for that because I don't know what that means. He gets us. Again, just the very name really exposes what this is about, right? He gets us. He knows our weakness. Therefore, don't hate, wash feet, and lose. That is not the Christian message. I'm sorry. Never has been. It's not in the Bible. It's not biblical. It's not historical. It's not doctrinal. Okay? And with that, dear friends, I will wish you a good night. And thanks for joining me. And I will see you anon. Take care. Bye.